ATF director takes one last shot at Trump and then he quit. Today I'm going to tell you what ATF director Steve Dettelbach, or former director Steve Dettelbach, said about Trump and if there's any legitimacy to his claims. But also, I want to talk about the timing of him quitting right now because it contradicts everything that ATF director Dettelbach has been saying this entire time and his reasoning for being there. I think you'll find this quite interesting. And of course, no matter if you agree or disagree with me, leave your opinion after the video. Let's go ahead and jump right in. Now, since Steve Dettelbach has been the ATF director, by the way, he wasn't the first choice, let's just be honest. He was the replacement choice for Biden's initial, which was Chipman. Chipman couldn't get the nomination, so Dettelbach stepped up, right? So his entire claim the whole time has basically been this.
I believe that the mission of this agency, which is fighting violent crime, is wildly nonpartisan and bipartisan.
We are apolitical, but it doesn't really line up if you look at exactly how much of Biden's agenda the ATF has tried to push through. I mean, backdoor gun registration techniques and backdoor universal background checks, right? Pistol braces. They try to scare millions of Americans into taking the bait and either destroying or registering them, changing the definition of frames and receivers, going after certain companies. Of course, implementing this rule, if you sell so many guns, now you're an FFL, and they can't have that. They got to have their piece of the pie as well, and so now you have to answer to the almighty ATF at that point, and of course, agree to their random show-ups, right? If they call you, or if they just show up, well, you agree to that once you become an FFL. Dettelbach has been on board with all of it. He's been one of the most anti-gun directors that we've ever had, and really, at the end of the day, they've done more to kind of scare people into buying guns. Maybe not as much as Obama, but let's be honest, it's pretty close. They've tried all of these different techniques in order to restrict everybody from 18 to 20-year-olds on up. So it's interesting that he would quit now. If they're apolitical and he really cares about lowering crime, right? Why not make the case to Trump? Like, hey, look, I know we've had our differences, but I care about people and I want to make these communities safer.
That is the only federal law enforcement agency that solely deals with violent crime. If you're really concerned about violent crime in the United States, this agency is way, way, way too small.
Right? Make your case. If Trump fires you, then, well, you did what you could do. He quits knowing that Trump was probably going to fire him without making his case. He made it pretty obvious that he doesn't care about making these communities safer. He cares about restricting rights and wielding power around. And he knows that with Trump in office, he's not going to have that backup or that directive from the executive branch kind of feeding all of his BS theories and then in return restricting the amount of power that he actually has. Maybe he thought he was getting a pay cut because the ATF, the proposal is to cut the budget from the ATF by another $188 million. Now look, do you feel bad for them? Because I know I don't. I know that hopefully that'll be part of less taxes that me and you have to pay. Well, at the end of the day, that's wishful thinking, right? But lower tax cuts are something that a lot of us voted on. And an agency that's already getting, what, $1.5 billion a year, just like under half of what the Secret Service is, you can see that there's probably some big money wasted. Even in this interview where I'm watching Dettelbach, I'm thinking to myself, why the hell do they need a building like this? You know what I mean? They have 5,000 employees throughout the entire United States. I don't know how many employees are in that one office in Washington, but I feel like funds could be used a heck of a lot better than what they already are. So if a $1.5 billion agency gets cut $188 million, I don't feel that bad for them, especially considering what they do. So I feel like the timing is interesting. But then Dettelbach said this about the Trump administration, about Trump essentially.
Dettelbach, who expects to leave his post when Donald Trump is inaugurated, warns that this agency is a prime target for major reductions.
If ATF were gone, what domino would fall?
And people would be killed.
He's saying those cuts are going to make a difference. It's going to get people hurt or worse. Well, people already do get hurt, unfortunately. As a matter of fact, you hurt somebody. Brian Malowinski, right? After like just a month after they signed that whole thing that, you know, you have to get an FFL if you're selling so many firearms, they thought that Brian was actually selling firearms illegally. So they did an investigation. They broke into his house. They cut the power first, then broke into his house, middle of the night. His wife is in the back of a cop car for like 4 hours, and they ended up taking his life. Operation Fast and Furious, right? Purposely selling guns to people they know shouldn't have them. And yet their mission is to keep these illegal guns off of the streets, or at least that's what they claim, along with a whole host of other things. The whole point of the ATF, really, depending on who's in charge, of course, is to restrict rights for you and me and circumvent Congress, because you have that whole Constitution thing that you got to deal with that gets in the way of them, and propose new rules, just really depending on how the director feels that day. That's kind of how your rights will be treated the next. This $188 million cut, I don't even think it's enough. I really do not think it's enough. And I say with a degree of certainty that the ATF, if they were completely abolished, would make zero difference in our lives whatsoever. Ask the people in some of the most crime-ridden cities if they think the ATF is doing some kind of good deed. Most of them would tell you, no, probably not. I say good riddance. I'm glad the guy's gone. If they leave the Bureau without a leader, I could care less. If they shut the thing down, I could care less. If they put a pro-gun person in there, well, that's better for all of us at the end of the day. Either way, this agency sucks, and we've seen it, and the most anti-gun person that's ever been director of the ATF is now out of there. That's just my opinion. Of course, I want to hear yours, no matter what it is. Leave that down below. Big thanks to you guys. See you in the next one. And as always, hold them down.